This next session will focus primarily on school while thinking broadly about preparing students for college and career readiness. In other words, it's all about the Common Core. Bruce Taylor will explore how the arts can be used to address the Common Core and contribute to overall student achievement. Mr. Taylor brings with him a range of experiences. After graduating from the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, he embarked on a 3-decade career as a performing arts professional. He has worked for opera, theater, and dance companies throughout the US, Canada, and South America. Inspired by Leonard Bernstein, his work focused on teachers and students, which led to the publication of his book, The Arts Equation, covering his arts and education experience. One of his programs, which he created as a consultant for the Metropolitan Opera's Education at the Met, was cited in the document Champions of Change, The Impact of the Arts on Learning. He expanded his impact internationally as a cultural ambassador for the U.S. Department of State through his creation of the Global Neighborhood Program that connected American students with their counterparts in other countries to collaborate on common arts projects over the internet. Recently, he was Director of Education for the Washington National Opera and currently serves as the Common Core Arts Consultant for Atlanta Public Schools. Please welcome Bruce Taylor.
Wow, what a setup. I trust you all had a very inspiring and productive conference here, and it's an honor for me to be here to talk to you about Common Core. And the reason is you guys are on the front lines of our future. You will shape the lives of those who are going to make decisions about all of us in 20, 30, and 40 years. So it's a privilege for me today, this morning, to give you my small, modest contribution to that mission. But before I delve into the future, I'd like to take a little backward glance at the past. How many of you are familiar with this sitcom?
Welcome back.
You don't know this. You're too young. This is from Welcome Back, Kotter. It was a sitcom that purported to show a typical high school in Brooklyn in the mid-'70s. It was John Travolta's breakout role. He's put on about 100 pounds since then. But one of the things I got started in the arts education field in the mid-'70s. And back then, and even today, the general public looks upon arts education as really for kids like these. Glee wannabes, or kids that want to be artists. But we're in the business of preparing all kids to be capable adults in the 21st century. This is a picture of Wayne Gretzky. It's been said that what made Wayne Gretzky a great hockey player wasn't that he skated to where the puck was. He skated to where he thought the puck would be. And for me, I'm trying to figure out where's the arts education puck going to be in the next 10 years. Because I've been on the receiving end and participated in every school reform effort that's come down the pike since the publication of A Nation at Risk in 1983. Back then, they concluded that if our educational system did not improve, quote, our social structure will crack, our culture erode, our economy totter, and our national defenses weaken. None of that came true, except maybe the Great Recession, which I would submit was caused by people who were ethically challenged, who had their levers on the financial power of this country, and probably were educated in very good schools. But anyway, it was part of the Back to Basics movement in the late 70s and early 30s. 30s? 80s. Terribly sorry, I'm not that old. Back in the 80s. And this Back to Basics gave rise to Goals 2000. Remember those? Not one of those was achieved either. Fast forward 10 more years to 2002, we end up with No Child Left Behind. We all know what happened to that. Fast forward 10 more years to 2012, we end up with Common Core state standards. Now, why should you bother with Common Core? First off, if history is any guide, we're going to be dealing with Common Core for the next 10 years. So, how many of you are going to be in this business in the next 10 years? For those of you who are not, I hope to convince you to stay. It's going to be implemented across all instructional domains. The principles of Common Core are not limited to literacy and math. Standardized tests, such as the PARC, which you're going to have here in Tennessee, will be aligned with Common Core, followed by the SAT. The guy, David Coleman, I think his name is, who started out on this Common Core trek, is moved to the College Board, so the SAT is going to be aligned with Common Core, and so probably is the ACT. I predict that districts will freak out when the test comes to fruition in 2015. Kentucky just piloted a PARC-like test. Scores dropped 30%. However, teacher evaluation will be based partially on student success on these tests. All educators will be held accountable for overall student achievement, read, literacy, and math. In Georgia, arts educators have to provide evidence of student growth, whatever that means. But most importantly, this is the first school reform effort that is friendly to the arts. And I hope to illustrate that for you today. I might point out that nobody, including me, has figured out how to effectively teach Common Core because it hasn't been around that long. They're still trying to figure out what the test is going to look like. They've postponed the PARC formative assessments for a year. They don't even know what the questions are that are appropriate for providing metrics to measure student achievement in a Common Core framework. So it's a level playing field. If you can't use what I share with you this morning, then I will have failed. And while the potential for failure is always pretty high, especially in the arts, I am going to give you my best shot. Also, if none of this comes true, you're off the hook. You can do whatever you want. For those who've been teaching 15, 20 years, don't have to change a thing. But if I'm right, you're going to have to adjust. Here are two quotes that I'd like to share with you. Ideas always need to be proposed and nurtured as possibilities until evidence weighs in one way or the other. The other's my quote. When you question the status quo, you automatically challenge those who have found success in it. Common Core is a profound shift in teaching and learning. And we're going to have to adjust, and we're going to have to adapt. And you don't adapt by clinging to the status quo. For me, it's the best of times or the worst of times. We're at a tipping point for the arts in education. We're either going to be looked upon as even more irrelevant than we already are, as an excuse for prep time or celebratory events, shrinking budgets, site-based management. I don't know if you have that here in Tennessee, but we have it in Chicago, where principals decide what comes into their building. In Chicago, the principals have been given total control over their budget. When those assessments hit in spring of 2015, I guarantee you they're going to be looking for more time for literacy and math. Or, we can be seen as contributing significantly to overall student achievement. And I hope to illustrate that for you this morning. You do not adapt to changing circumstances by employing existing techniques and methodologies. You create new ones using your own imagination in order to succeed. I want to give you what I call a modifiable template today that will enable you to use your own creativity and imagination to come up with ways to teach your subject matter through the lens of Common Core without depending upon the ideas, the exercises, the activities from other people. Because those other people are not in your classroom every day. You are. Why all this? Why Common Core? Remember these? 21st century skills? We still cite these, right? We want kids to develop their creativity, innovation, critical thinking, problem solving, adaptability, flexibility, all those things. Where'd that come from? That was about 5 years ago. The internet, which I point out is a visual and oral artistic medium, as are their associated technologies. The other thing is, the internet compels people in different cultures to interact on a much more intimate basis than ever before, whether they want to, like to, or not. Prior to the advent of the internet, the standard paradigm for teaching and learning was access, delivery, retention of content. Back in Mr. Cotter's day, you want new content, you had to read a book. Go to school, read a book. Go to the library, read a book. If you're lucky enough at home, you had books. My parents got for me, when I was a kid, the Encyclopedia Britannica. But that's not the case today. We have instant access to unlimited content by anybody, at any time, from any place on the planet. But the access, well, wait a minute. Let me think here. I can even get Google, type in a subject, get a bunch of websites, pick the most appropriate website, voila, content. I can get content on my cell phone. Let me ask you for a minute. What percentage of high school students in your districts have a cell phone? About 100%. Because it's a cultural imperative for teenagers. Think of where the cell phone was 5 years ago. Think of where it's going to be in 5 years. How many of you have Siri on your iPhone? For those of you who don't know about Siri, Siri is a voice-activated application that can give you the answer to any fact-based question. I can ask Siri, when were the Articles of Confederation ratified? What is the Pythagorean theorem? What's a B-flat major key signature? What is Impressionism? And she will tell me. It's a female voice. Now couple that with devices such as the iPad textbook. Here's my mini iPad, which is obviously more portable, more durable, more interactive, more searchable, and more up-to-date than all those textbooks. This is all I need. And I can ask it to give me the answer. This means in 5 years or even now, kids have access to the same content you do. It used to be that the only way they could get the content was the book or out of your head. Not anymore. Not anymore. And they can get a lot more information than maybe even you know about. In 5 years, it will be absurd to deny kids the opportunity to bring a device like that in to take a test. Some of you are of my generation, a few. How many of you remember open book exams? Oh, okay, a bunch of you. Remember that? When I was in high school, in chemistry and physics primarily, I could bring in any reference material I wanted to take the test. Because the goal was not about what I remembered, it was about what could I do with the content I had available to me. Because of all that, because of technology, competency will be based on two critical skills. Ask the right questions to acquire relevant and necessary content. Two, transfer that content into a productive context. Why is all this important? I recommend you read this book, Daniel Pink's Drive. He predicts that in the workplace of the 21st century, jobs are going to be divided into algorithmic, essentially do what you're told, follow directions, or heuristic, conceptual, inherently complex. Algorithmic depends on external incentives. Don't do this or you're fired. Heuristic is inherently intrinsically engaged or engaging. I do a thing with high school students where I take out a $20 bill and a $50 bill, and I say, yo, you want to make 20 bucks an hour when you get out of school? You want to make 50. They always say 50. I say, all right, from $15 to $25 an hour, you're going to be paid to do what you're told, follow directions. For $50 on up, you're going to be paid to think, to create, and to communicate effectively. In other words, you're not going to really work with your hands. You're going to be paid for your ideas. You're going to be paid to imagine things that don't exist. I'm sure that some of you have that banner in your school that says 80% of the jobs kids will have haven't been invented yet. I've seen those in schools that I work in. There's a lot of research trying to predict what kids are going to have to learn. Here's one of them. Future Work Skills 2020. That's 7 years from now. It's an offshoot of the RAND Corporation. They say skills will include sense-making, social intelligence, novel adaptive thinking, cross-cultural competency, computational thinking, blah, 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 you can read. Even old standbys. What's this? Bloom's taxonomy. It's even been revised to put creativity at the top. Now let me ask you a question. It begs the question. How do we teach kids to be creative if they're not allowed to be creative? And how can you teach creativity if you are not allowed to be creative in your teaching? Oh, okay. I'm among friends. So, what advantages do you bring to the table through the arts? Well, first and foremost, people who teach the arts will be less micromanaged than those who teach literacy and math. I am sure that Pearson, as I speak, is developing reams of material to show you how to teach through Common Core. They're going to give you step-by-step instructions, which leaves you no room for innovation on your part. Follow directions. Do what they tell you. The next idea, you provide an opportunity for truly student-centered learning. And it's wrapped up in one little pithy statement. I don't want to know what you know. I want to know what you think. What do you think, kid? And then use what that kid tells you to teach them. You are in the creativity business when you deal with the arts. You have the capacity to create your own innovative practices aligned with Common Core. I am here to show you. You can start by using what I call the principles of arts infusion. I dreamed these up about 6 years ago. The first one is engage the emotions. What is the one adjective that all dropouts use to describe school? Boring. If you are bored, you are by definition emotionally disengaged. What do we sell? Emotion. So if I can get a kid to feel, I can get them to care. If I can get them to care, I can get them to learn. Respond appropriately to the unanticipated. When I was a stage director in the opera business, I'd sit at home, and I'd work out my staging, my blocking with the score. Then I'd walk into rehearsal, and whatever I thought was going to happen in that rehearsal, not all of it occurred. Maybe I had a singer who came up with an idea that I didn't think of, and I go, wow, that's a great idea. Let's do that. Or I had a conductor who had set a tempo that was too fast for the singers to do what I wanted them to do, and I had to adjust. You can use drama role-playing in order to teach kids how to respond appropriately to unanticipated social circumstances. Discovery leads to curiosity. I would much rather have a kid discover content than to deliver it to them, because that encourages curiosity. And curiosity leads to lifelong learning. If a kid is not curious, take away the external incentives, and learning ceases. Provide a context that motivates interest. It's a dictum in education. You start with what a kid knows. You don't plop content down in the middle, in front of them, without any frame of reference. So I'd go one step further. Start with what matters to them. Find out about their world. Find out what they care about. Allow opportunity for creative or personal input. We're going to do that today. I'm going to give you that opportunity. Because input equals ownership. Ownership equals retention of content. And finally, create a bridge for an understanding of the world and others. That leads to empathy. I would say the majority of classroom behavioral problems stem from a lack of empathy. I don't care. I'm not aware of how you feel, especially if I'm on the receiving end of that. Now, the nice thing about Common Core, one of the nice things, it gives us the chance to do that. So let's get to Common Core. What are the differences between Common Core and what came before? As I said earlier, previous paradigm was based on access, delivery, and retention of content, but this led to a mindset of the more content I dump on the kid, the better I am, right? The more stuff I can pack in, I'm a better teacher. As a result, the average high school textbook is between 750 and 1,000 pages long. Take a look at them in every subject. I did a little experiment. It takes a kid about 40 to 50 hours just to read the damn thing. And in a Carnegie unit of 120 to 140 hours of seat time for a given subject in the school year, it's going to take them more than a third to read it. So that equals content overload. And we do it in the arts. If you look at many districts' curriculum framework for the arts, if you were to actually do all that stuff, you wouldn't have time to do anything else. One of the things I try to teach kids through the arts is context. It's similar to setting when you do a script. Setting affects character, behavior, and interaction. The way somebody behaves in 1750 is not the same as 2012. So when we talk about setting, we're talking about time and place, right? Let's talk about time. How much time do educators have to prepare kids to become capable adults in a 21st century world? I'm going to ask you, what is the percentage of a child's waking hours in a calendar year? What percentage is actually sitting in a classroom learning curriculum? What do you think? 30? 30%. What do you think? Yeah. I don't care.
I'd say 100.
100%. What do you think?
8%.
8%. 30%. Here's the answer. 16%. I'm going to do the math for you in a minute. That means we are competing with 84% of the other influences in that kid's life. More importantly, back to what she said, 100%, she's just blowing me off. But We're also competing with 84% of the other learning they're doing, because learning doesn't stop when they leave the classroom. Let me do the math for you. 365 days times 14 hours a day is a little over 5,000 total hours. 4.5 hours in a 6-hour school day is spent actually learning curriculum. Get rid of recess, get rid of lunch, get rid of assembly programs, get rid of field trips, blow off the last 2 weeks of school when nothing much happens anyway. Blow off test prep. And you end up with about 800 hours, little less than 16%. But it gets more interesting than that. The cumulative amount of time spent on a core academic subject is 1 month. If you were to teach it 6 hours a day, every weekday, you're done in a month. If you start math on October 1st, you're done by Halloween. Now let's look at the art specialist reality. The standard equation in the United States is 1 period per week per cohort of students, times 36 weeks is about 24 hours. So if you were to put that into a week, and you start on Monday morning, let's say music teachers, you start on your fall concert on Monday morning at 8 o'clock, you're done at Tuesday at 3. And then you're going to start on your spring concert, and you're finished by the end of the school day on Thursday. That's it. So that begs the question, again, I have a lot of these begging questions things. Given such limited time, what do your kids need to learn about the arts? Taking into account that the vast majority of those kids will never grow up to be full-time working artists. For example, for me, notation in music is equal to typing in writing, because composition in both takes place here. And there's a difference between playing music and making music. In order to do this, in order to contribute to overall student achievement, we have to get away from remember. Remember your notes, remember your staging, remember your information, blah, blah, blah. And most important, do what I tell you and follow directions. That's the majority of arts education. But that's instruction. That's not teaching. We use those terms, instruction, teaching, interchangeably. They're not. And I'm going to use a comparison developed by my colleague Ed Pajak at the Johns Hopkins School of Education, where he compares instruction and teaching. I'm going to give you an example from my own life. When I joined the Navy, I went to boot camp, where I was trained by instructors who were senior petty officers just brought in from the fleet. They weren't teachers. And what's the difference? In teaching, it's imperative. Do this. In boot camp, it was do this until you can do this, you're going to stay here. And nobody wanted to stay in boot camp for more than 11 weeks. For us, it's facilitative. How can I help you? How can I find a way to enable you to learn more effectively? In instruction, it's unidirectional. Everything's coming from me to you. There's no feedback. But with teaching, it's interactive. In instruction, it's planned. You know the term predetermined outcomes? I know exactly what you're supposed to do. I know exactly what you're supposed to say at the end of this. That's instruction. For us, as teachers, it's more spontaneous. The kid says something or does something or thinks about something in such a way that I go, I'm going to use that. It's objective. The military has mastered instruction. How do you think they get a 19-year-old kid on an aircraft carrier to repair the engine of an F-18? But with us, it's subjective. It's human interaction. We're not talking about content. We're talking about the